Almost 20 minutes before 8. Now, community-based organizations advocating for land rights are concerned about the spate of illegal land grabs in the country. Just recently, police had to step in as invaders and residents of Protea Glen in Soweto clashed and violence then erupted. Joining us now on the line to discuss this further, we've got Constance Mogale, who is the director of the Land Access Movement of South Africa. Constance, thanks very much. Thanks so much for joining us on the line.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you for having me.
These land grabs, they've increased, mostly here in Gauteng. But you say it's not only in this province. How prevalent are these land grabs in other parts of the country?
I think in other parts of the country, the land grabs that are happening are not visible because it is probably the land that is not... that doesn't have any commercial value, and that is in remote areas, and nobody's taking interest in those land grabs.
Yeah, but from what you've heard, where would you say? I mean, obviously, I highlighted Gauteng because it gets a lot of publicity. The cameras are there, filming what's happening. But from reports and hearing from the ground, where else is this taking place?
I think it's happening around the northwest, around KZN, in Durban, where this movement called Abahlali Basemjondolo is active. So it is happening, and it is because of the backlog of the 2.1 million in South Africa, the housing backlog. So this is a crisis in the city, which is very urgent, where accommodation is a dire need. But this dire need is hijacked by syndicates who are they're trying to be landlords because they grab the land and lease it to people who are desperate for accommodation. And they also, the aspiring politicians who want to create their own ward committees for the upcoming elections so that they can win the votes. So the desperation of the poor people is being hijacked by the authoritarian populist movements, you know.
I mean, I'm looking at some reports coming through, even in KwaZulu-Natal. One of the reports suggesting that there were land grabs taking place in a very upmarket place on the northern KwaZulu-Natal coast, in the Umhlale area. It's a prestigious estate where properties go for millions of rands, and they're selling land for 50 rand. That's what's going on, and some plots are being sold there. It's undeveloped, but it's privately owned. I mean, this is, obviously we call it illegal land grabs, but let's get your views on this. I mean, what is your take on land grabs and the illegal occupation of land?
Well, Leon, we cannot ignore the statistics that there's a housing backlog, and the metropolitan cities, they need to up their game in terms of identifying land that belongs to companies like Transnet and survey it and make sure that they allocate land. People are saying we need accommodation. If there is still a budget shortage in terms of building houses, give us land and we will see how we do. But because of the city is not proactive, in fact, because we are led by popular politicians, popular votes, people who want votes, when people invade the land, they try to stop them, but then they go in there and start formalizing the settlement, which promotes, for people who have been law-abiding citizens and waiting in the waiting list, they think, okay, this is the easy way out. Let's identify land, grab the land, and then they will build houses for us. But my worry for this is that people who are advising these groups are not advising them very well because they are putting them into more poverty. The land that they are occupying is not properly surveyed. There is no proper planning for services to be provided. And they are cutting smaller stands, so sitting on top of each other again. So by the time they realize that we need services, we will have children who need schools, we will need clinics. Then they take to the street and destroy the very same infrastructure that they so desperately need. So that's the problem. And I don't think the way it is happening now, it should be the way that should happen. I think social movements need to demonstrate best practices of how to settle our people, to make sure that they are settled in decent spaces and they are also able to make livelihoods out of those spaces they are occupying.
Well, that's the big problem. Now, Constance, let's get a view from you, because you know very well what the situation is like in communities when it comes to land rights. So as somebody or as an organisation that engages with communities, and as much as it wouldn't be wise to condone these actions, to what extent would you actually empathise and understand the invaders' perspective?
I think for me to emphasize and to understand, it is not important. I think what is important is for us to educate our people, not to be used, and not, like the land question has been there on the agenda ever since the 1800s. But because now people want to sway votes to their direction, they have infiltrated the topic, hijacked it, and now it's getting out of proportion. So we need to educate our people, but the problem is, where do we get investment to make sure that the people's development and understanding is improved? So secondly, where are the progressive professionals, academics, who are willing to do this thing voluntarily? Because we are not affording we need activists, surveyors, activist town planners, activist experts who can sit with us in a camp where we plan that, okay, we have identified this land, who is this land, how productive is this land, what are we compromising or what are we going to gain, look at it and survey it. And by the time we occupy, we must make sure that we show the government this is how we want our people to be treated. This is how we want the future of South Africa. And people need land for different reasons. So if people are just needing land for tenancy, why is government not improving the abandoned buildings in the city, putting it into decent accommodation, and make sure that people can afford that rent? So we don't see the city developing anything for poor people. All they do is for business. So that's their problem. They must take the blame. Indeed. But I think we need to go to the drawing board and invest on camps and educational awareness-raising campaigns for our people.
Just, Constance, as we wrap this up, do you foresee that these land grabs are going to be occurring more often?
I think it's going to reoccur more often, especially because of this recent resolution that was passed in Parliament on expropriation of land without compensation, and without giving a proper direction of how it will happen, when, and at what cost, and without giving people proper direction of land for what, for who. Because we need to make sure that we do proper classification of our people so that expropriation is happening at the best interest of the people and for public interest, which is already in the Constitution. And I don't know why people are pushing for the amendment of the Constitution, because the Constitution provides for that. But the government that we have lacks teeth. They don't have a muscle to implement that. Even if we review the Constitution, we need to look at the kind of state apparatus we have. Is it adequate to deliver the kind of land reform or the kind of reforms that we need?
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us. That was Constance Mogale, who's the director of the Land Access Movement of South Africa. Let's take a break.